So we're going to discuss really the play production report. This is a 50-point assignment. You're going to do 2 of them. You're going to watch a live performance online. Sorry, I know that's kind of an oxymoron, live performance online, and it's recorded. But you're actually watching a recording of a theatrical performance that took place in front of a live audience, so that you will hopefully have as close as an experience as you can. If you've never been to a play, this is a very hard way to understand what plays are about. Some of the recording and filming of plays is very good. Some of it is not good. Some of them translate better. I've tried to pick the very best ones. So if you had a chance to look at the Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, which I sent out last week as an announcement, because it was only open 48 hours, then you can just reflect on it with the questions that are asked in the play performance report. I've indicated in that particular assignment how you accrue points. Every single element that you indicate is 5 points. And so as you mention certain things and give me an example of that, you get 5 points for that. So please let me know if you have any questions about how the assignment works, and then you'll just submit it. But today we're going to talk about really some of the things you can be looking at while you're looking at a play, and the difference. What is criticism? This is all regarding chapter 14, with, of course, the very infamous Pam insertions of what she thinks about everything. So here we go. So Viewpoints is the name of the chapter, and it really is talking about dramatic criticism versus theater criticism. What is it? What does, why does it even exist? And I think that's quite interesting, because actually Aristotle is the first theater critic. He's the first one to actually look at this form of entertainment and kind of break it down and make his certain assumptions. Like that's why he made that assumption about unity of time. Time should take place in the play exactly the same way that time takes place as the audience is sitting there. Now, you have to realize that sometimes the audience was sitting there for 2 or 3 days. They would often walk for weeks to go to certain festivals, and then they really wanted to get their money's worth. They wanted it to be worthwhile. Yes, must be a Dodge Charger outside my window. But they wanted it to be worth their while. They made a huge effort to get there, so they wanted the celebration to be really worthy of it. And so they didn't mind sitting there and having this entertainment going for 3 or 4 days. Also, you have to remember that when they're talking about, when Aristotle's talking about a play like Oedipus, it's happening in a much different kind of arena than what we're talking about now. It's not an enclosed structure the way we are now. It would be out of doors. There would be a lot of vendors in there selling things while the play is going on. There's a lot of different kind of commotion and different kinds of entertainments as well. So he's the first, what we consider the first critic, and still amazingly long lasting that we listen to him. So dramatic criticism, again, we're looking at the difference between dramatic criticism and theater criticism first. It's not just semantics. So, and it's difficult because we use those terms somewhat interchangeably today. We use drama and theater as somewhat the same thing. And I've explained that because, remember the Greek verb drawn, to play, to do, to act, maybe is closer to drama, but they are really 2 distinct things. And dramatic criticism pretty much refers to the written text. So scholarly writing on the written text. They're talking about the book. If we're talking about a musical, we're really talking about the words of the book, not the music, not the composer, the story. So from a literary, cultural, and historical perspective, a theoretical perspective. So someone is looking at this script as, what is it about? What are they saying? How are the words unfolding on the page? What kind of language are they using? Is it a language that really is vital and has a lot of immediacy for the characters? Is it creating a really specific cultural context? Do we understand the cultural context? Can we, even if we are from a different culture, can we understand the play within the context, the cultural context in which it's set. So that is a measure of good writing. If as an audience member we're unfamiliar with the particular cultural setting, that we can still understand and we can still see ourselves in that cultural setting. And from a historical point of view, that's why I thought Trifles was such a great piece to look at, because from our modern eyes, it really, every single person got that this very cold relationship between the men and the women. They're not quite friends. There's not a lot of warmth between them. And this is historically accurate because women were thought of as less than. Women couldn't possibly have a good idea. That's why the whole slam when they come down the stairs and say, "Oh, did you figure out if the quilt was knotted?" And that is a disregard for the women's work when actually they're making the quilts by hand. That's what's keeping you warm at night. That is really, you're functioning because of that. So creating a historical context for the story in which the story lives, and then a theoretical perspective about, sorry, my dog is bumping me. A theoretical perspective about, what really is the meaning of this play about, and how does that hold our story from now and going forward? Does it have weight and worth? A dramaturg is somebody who uncovers the hidden meaning in the script. It is analyzing the social, philosophical, and cultural context. So the dramaturg can tell you why a character's in a particular play, what are they doing in the scene, why are they there, what is happening in the world around this. Is this a set against a backdrop of World War II? Is this set against the backdrop of right now, COVID-19? We're all in our, little cocoons. So the dramaturg is one of the things we're going to look at when we talk about Tempest, when everyone's going to have a backstage portion and an onstage character portion. Dramaturgy is one of those that you can select. How do you uncover hidden meaning in a play? What does that mean? It's hidden. I mean, the words are there. How is it? But again, it's like with Trifles, that which is unsaid is as important as that which is said. So you want to look at what they're saying, what the characters are saying in context with other characters. How does a character talk about themselves? How do other characters talk to them? So in Trifles, we had the women really trying to talk to themselves about how would they feel if they were in this particular situation that Mrs. Wright is finding herself in, where people are coming in and examining her house without her having an opportunity to clean it up. And then we're looking at how the men are talking to these women, Mrs. Peters and Mrs. Hale, who've come with them. So there is some meaning there that is just not on the page. And then looking at the social aspects of that, the male-female dynamic, the status aspect of that, which would be the county lawyer who's elevated, educated, and possibly not more wealthy because he's young and it didn't really have a job that was considered as valuable as actually working the land and the agriculture, not providing an essential service such as food. Probably the person that has the most material wealth would be the sheriff because of the social status. And then the farmers, and then the farmer's helper. So we've got all many different layers against which we need to look at the meaning. And then philosophically, is one character more important than the other, or how does this story take weight for us today? Oh, I've done that. Okay. Let's go back. Okay. And then looking at the cultural context of really an agricultural community, and an agricultural community not in prime agricultural time, not when they're harvesting, not when they're planting, not in the glorious times, but when they are, trying to continue to have a meager living by taking their potatoes to market. So This dramatic criticism looks at the study of the dramatic character, all the characters in context, and then the main characters and the secondary characters. It analyzes the play forms, some of what we talked about, how many of those conventions are within this play. Did they use the play within the play conceit? Does the playwright write in a more formal way? And then specifically the interpretation of the text and of course we as a dramaturg or a critic today, if we're looking at a historical text, can only see it through our context of the 21st century. We can't put blinders on and experience it as the playwright was writing it. All we can do is think about what is the context that the play was written in, what's happening in the world around the playwright, what do we think the playwright is trying to tell the audience, and then do we have something that we can relate to about that within our contemporary world. Dramatic criticism works specifically with the text or the words of the script. So they look at all of the theories of linguistics, how language is formed, what words are used, which words are put in context with others. That's why I asked you to pull out words for trifles. And many of you found the local colloquialisms saying as, or the use of queer, meaning something that's odd, not quite right. They look at the anthropological way. How has man changed? What is the formation of man? What is mankind's meaning in this play? Cultural and critical history. Where is it located specifically? Within what cultural context? Where is this village, this town, this city, this state, this country? And then what is the critical history, or what are the historical events that are occurring around the time of the play and around the time that the play is taking place? So today's playwrights can write a play and set it in the 1940s, and we often see that more with a movie play script. But why do we have that need to look back on the 40s through our eyes and then put it within that context of what's happening in the world? I think we'll see some very interesting writing about what's happening from right now. So this can include theories of gender. We are looking at definitely gender disparity in trifles. Feminism, I think many of you got this a note about, the playwright's actually quite courageous that she's bringing this up, and it's almost subversive the way that she's looking at the women's role and making them the strongest part of the play by elevating their meaning with giving them the weight of figuring out what happened. And then not only did they figure out what happened, but then they're going to protect the woman that could be accused of murder from the men. So it's a very interesting thing to look at. The reception of the play and post-colonialism. What are we thinking of now in our contemporary world instead of how, our world was established? If it's in the United States, how we were established from colonies of Great Britain. We rebelled against them. We then decided to overtake everything that was in it. We brought slaves over to cruelly work and meet the needs of the people that were actually interlopers in the land. So all of these ways to look at things are what the dramatic criticism is talking about. Very literary and really text related. When we go to theater criticism, we're talking about a professional assessment of what is seen on stage. Sorry, not what is seen, what is seen. So this deals with the plays in performance. And of course, this makes an assumption that you actually have to see what is presented. And that is maybe a little trickier than what you think. The theater critic can make or break a play's success. And you saw this in Chasing Broadway Dreams, when they were waiting for what did the critics say about it. And then they saw, a bright new star was coming. The theater critics say, no, that's not true, but it is true. They are an economic force that can actually make or break the play's success. Can the play go forward? If you're not going to get good press, who's going to come and buy a ticket? So how are they going to figure out to buy a ticket? So it's a very, they are really wielding a lot of power with their words. Once they are an established critic, their words are listened to far more than the director. So that becomes an economic force in the whole world of the play, and it affects the quality of theater and plays we see. So what if a critic loves a particular kind of theater and that becomes a sensation? Do we see more of that kind of theater? Do we want to replicate that success? Are we trying to, use a formula? And that's a very interesting viewpoint, because the formulaic situation almost never works. And when we think about a movie and we watch sequels, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So how do we see theater as an audience? When we come in as an audience, we actually have our own personal experience. Generally, when you're sitting in the chair, you're not talking to the person next to you. You may be aware of their breath. You may be aware if they laugh, if they applaud, if they stand up, if they're fidgeting. But more importantly, what happens after we see the play? After seeing the play, we discuss it with others. So if it was great, we'll talk about it. If it was bad, we'll talk about it. If it was just nothing, that's the worst, because you're really not interested in talking about it at all. So hopefully theater is provocative and it propels you into a discussion. And if you hate it, that's perfectly as valid a viewpoint as if you loved it. But it's not enough to just say you hate it. How can you discuss that more thoroughly? One of the ways is to talk about, what is the truthfulness of the acting? Did you believe that actor as the character? Did it really seem like the character? You forgot about who the actor was and you started really thinking about the character and the story of the character in the play. Did the play discuss the human and social experience of mankind? What are we doing? How are we surviving? How are we making our way in the world? And what was the merit of the play on the artistic and entertainment value? Were you entertained? Could you sit in the seat? Did you have a good time? Even if it was a tragedy, was it something that you could really understand? It provided a catharsis. It provided a relief from the stress that you're feeling in the everyday life. Was the artistic value very, very high? You felt like it was of a professional level. It was beautifully rendered to your eye, something like that. So here are some audience viewpoints that we might look at. Human significance. Theater artists connect with a common humanity. So the theater artist would be the director, the actors, the visual artists. So they're connecting with this universal humankind, trying to explore what it means to be human in a specific circumstance. Now, if you look at Oedipus, you're thinking, wow, really? That is such a specific circumstance. How can we possibly identify with that? But it is looking at Oedipus, who's caught between what the oracle said that was his destiny and trying to work against that, and yet he fulfills it anyway. Actors, as the characters, become reflections of ourselves. You may see yourself, or you may see a piece of yourself as one of the characters. And it doesn't have to be the same gender, it can be anything, but that particular character may be having the same struggle that you, or maybe made the same mistake you made, or maybe is just providing a great entertainment laugh for you. What is the social significance for the audience viewpoints? Theater has an inherent relationship to society. We talked about that early on. Man has told their story from the beginning of time. I'm coming home, I'm gathering the food, I'm coming home from the hunt, I've been successful or I haven't been successful. Everyone can relate to I need to put food on the table. Everyone has to eat. So when things are acted out, it's something that has been rehearsed for centuries. We've been listening to stories. The stage is an arena to discuss issues. And so 2 things on this. The play within the play is a way to hide an issue by putting it in a context of a play within a play so that you can talk about a real issue. Or, for example, if we then look at the Theater of Alienation in Bertolt Brecht, where we see him wanting the audience to actually know this is not, you're in a theater, you're not watching a play, don't engage here, we want to show you, here are the issues. So either way, it's an arena to discuss issues. You can have insight on old and new social issues and on human behaviors. And hopefully insight meaning we take something away. We learn something about ourselves in the process. Then we have the aesthetic significance. Each audience member has aesthetic standards. It's like, what do you perceive as beauty? When you see something, what is it that you are struck with? What is it that says, yes, this is helping me understand the story? Have you ever seen something that's so magnificent it basically takes your breath away? And maybe it's something in nature like a spectacular waterfall. Or yesterday, for example, I was at the dentist and he had just such a detailed and amazing painting in his office. And I'm looking at basically a 2x2 square inch piece of this painting that is 4 feet by 3 feet, because it's so dense with information. And it was actually relaxing to me to be able to see this and think, wow, why is this person drawing a woman with 8 toes on this foot and 6 toes on this foot, and what's going on? And so it created a curiosity in me. So what is your aesthetic standard? What is the thing that appeals to you? Can you what sustains your interest visually? So when you have more theater experience, you're able to open up greater awareness of the elements of theater. It's kind of like learning to drive. You might think that driving is just turn on the key and steer, but there's so much more outside the window that you need to look at, and so that you can be safe, and so many variables every single time you get in. So same is true with theater. There's so many variables. Even if you see the same play put on by the same group of players, the same set design, costume design, and everything is the same, every time you see it, there will be variables. You'll be watching it with different audience. There will be different actors interacting as characters with each other because of whatever happened in their day. And so your experience becomes more finely attuned every time you watch theater. And finally, hopefully, it is an entertainment. It's amusing, or it affirms that as a society, we will survive our human failabilities. And right now we're trying to survive coronavirus and all the varying kinds of information we get changing, day to day, hour by hour. And I don't know if you're affected by that, or maybe you can just let that go by you and you don't have to have an anxiety feeling about it. You're just willing to sit back and allow things happen. So the professional critic, this is the person that's going to be writing about the play performance, and you're going to become a professional critic. You're going to become a critic that's going to write about a play performance. It takes place after the fact. You're watching the performance, and then the performance is over. A critic is generally writing on a deadline, so they're absolutely trying to get their piece of work into their publisher as soon as possible, because as we saw in Chasing the Broadway Dreams, they are waiting, the producers are waiting until those critics' reviews are published, and no matter what time, they want to be at the ready, whether that's 2 a.m. Now, usually it's around 2 a.m. because that's when the paper comes out for the next day. So they serve to recognize and preserve the work of good artists. And that's one of the things that a critic is really good at. They serve as a historian. They talk about the social and theatrical records of their times. And they act as a mediator between audience and artist. So if they love a play, they'll tell everyone that it is why they think this play has merit. And then that will encourage more audience to go to it. Sometimes they use their mediator in that they're translating what they've seen on stage to something that the audience can understand in a different way, because the critic is professionally seeing many, many plays and maybe has a greater grasp of the elements and might bring out something that as an audience member you did not see. But when it's brought to your attention, it's something that makes you either want to go see it again or see it for the first time. The critic's creativity is professionally documented as it's published. It's set. You have an example in your textbook of a critic that actually wrote one review, and then the next day wrote another one. So once you've done it, it's documented, it's set. If you change your mind, you need to write another review. Often the critic's job is to look at innovation. How is this giving us new information, or how is this giving us information in a new way so that we, in our contemporary world, understand it more easily? How is it actually maybe shocking to us? Does it have an experimental quality where they're changing up things so that we are maybe, as a learning experience, beginning to understand how people can meet together in a new way? Particularly when we're looking at things like, COVID-19 and COVID-19, people who've had that and going back to work, and how do we know that they're completely healed? There will be a lot of things to look at. So the critic asks the questions, what is the playwright trying to do? And I think this goes to what I said before about this story is about, and then fill in the blank. So the playwright is trying to say maybe a particular universal truth. Is a playwright trying to show or illustrate a slice of life? Is a playwright trying to give you an insight on some kind of an event? So first of all, when you see a play or a play production, what is the playwright trying to do? And then secondly, how well has it been done? Take a look at it. How well it's been done. Were the actors well rehearsed? Did it all go together seamlessly? Did you see clearly the beginning, the middle, and the end? And then lastly, was it worth doing? Was it worth your time to sit there? Was what the playwright was trying to do was actually worth it to you and worth it to you as an audience? So the playwright will make performance notes, which would be a detailed analysis of excellent productions. And they do that through documenting the work of the influencers of the play. So first of all, we have an understanding of the play script itself. And then how did the director interpret what the playwright was trying to do? How was that communicated to the actors? How did the actor then interpret their character? And then when we get to the avant-garde companies, these are companies that are dealing with things in a non-traditional way. How are they telling you the story? We looked at bread and puppet theater, which is really, they show you things sometimes in quite a grotesque, extra large puppet face that has one particular gesture on it so that you understand clearly what is that character about. The critical standards are it's one person's encounter with the theatrical event. Sometimes they're elevated far above just one person, but it is really their personal aesthetic encountering the theatrical event. So when we think about Rotten Tomatoes, when people weigh in on whether they like this particular movie or not, it's a collective voice that's made up of individual voices of their experience of how they experience the event. Critics are good or bad based on the reasons for their opinions. So do they justify their opinion? Do they justify their opinion in a reasonable way? Does it make sense to you when a statement is told? And that's why when you write your play critique, you're going to let me know why you felt the set design was good, bad, or indifferent. So when you look at the play performance report, and we can pull it up here in just a minute, you're developing your ability to see. So there are prompts that are helping you to ask a question, to set a context about the play that you're watching. You need to use both description and evaluation. So you can describe what you see, and then you can evaluate whether you think it's good or not. You can evaluate whether it was worth doing. Was it worth your time? This can help add a new dimension to your discovery of theater, and hopefully you'll be able to look at the elements of theater in a new way and with a heightened perspective. When you write about your insights, you become a critic. And everyone has an opinion. Your opinion is as valid as anyone else's. The important thing is that you tell us why you've made that determination and why that opinion is something that we should care about and that we should read. Questions?
No.
No?
No.
Okay, so hopefully that helps you understand a bit about the play performance report. So would there be a lot of intermissions then? What do you mean by that question, Bailey?
Oh, I think I asked that question when we were talking about how the plays used to be like go on for days, and I was just curious. Yeah. Like,
well, I think more than formal intermissions, what we're talking about is there was a collective community that went to the play. That became the way that you lived. So you may have a tent or you may have something else, and you would go to the place where the play was in performance. And there are a lot of other things going on at the same time. So there would be some breaks in between acts, and also then different activities would be going on even in between the acts. So yes, not a formal intermission like we, bring the lights up and everybody exits the theater. It's definitely not that formal of an experience, but rather the coming and going as you prefer. Sure.
That's interesting. I wonder if they would miss important parts of the plot and then get confused.
Well, if you remember Oedipus, so there's an interesting way that it unfolds in that the characters will say something, and then the chorus reinterprets what the character said for you. So the plot is reinforced again. And normally they would be done, like Oedipus is done of part of a trilogy of plays. So you would see the first Oedipus, the king, Oedipus at Colonus, and I think Antigone is the third piece of that. So yeah, the story's probably well known to you, and you're looking at a new interpretation of it.
Oh, okay.
So you could miss some things, sure, but then you might be getting them from the rest of your community. So is there anything like that today? Well, that's an interesting question. And of course, not right at the second, there's probably nothing like that. But for example, if you've ever gone to the Ashland Shakespeare Festival in Ashland, Oregon, they do Shakespeare outdoors in an 800-seat theater, but the whole feeling of it is much more like a festival. So they have the green, which is the way that you're mingling with other audience members before you get into your seat. When the play is actually unfolding, you're probably more in your seat in a more formal way. But before and after that, there's all kinds of activities that relate to the particular play, including things like tours backstage, different short people doing performances of music and getting you into the mood of whatever the play is beforehand. The entire town is pretty much based off of the Shakespeare Festival. It's been there for well over 50 years. So almost everyone is connected to the festival in some way. So it feels more like the entire town itself is related to the play performance. So that part's pretty fun. One thing that I would bring up is I think it's probably more like Coachella. You know, it's where we see some very big performance acts, but there's a lot of things going on in the audience. There's a lot of opportunity for food and drink and mingling and doing other things, even while the performance is going on. So I think, in my very limited opinion, that the formal way of looking at a play like Oedipus was more like Coachella. And I think it would be exciting to go back to that kind of a feeling and create a, you know, we could do a 3-day festival of plays outdoors. How can we make that kind of a thing happen? Woodstock was probably one of the earliest things that created a very big festival feel. And actually that was kind of subversive, the whole thing. It was really part of the anti-Vietnam War movement. So, you know, I think that it's not as formal a story, but some of the performers do have universal truth that they're talking about. Also, you could look at sporting events. So when you're looking at particularly football, you start with tailgating parties that can happen a long time in advance of the actual event itself. You go into the arena. There's a lot of pre-show activities where the audience is free to be mingling back and forth, to go to food locations, to do all kinds of different kinds of activities. And yes, you may or may not miss a play while you're going off and visiting with friends somewhere. There's certainly an elevated and a status about where you sit. Are you in a box seat, or are you down at the 50-yard line, or are you somewhere over in nosebleed section way far away and everybody's really small? So yeah, I mean, sporting events I think tend to give us that feel more like the previous theater events. That's why I love doing theater outdoors. I think that it creates more of that informal festival atmosphere. There's another theater in Los Angeles. Let me think about it. It's Will Geer, the Theatre Botanicum, and it is over on the coast, somewhat in the Malibu area, and they do theater outdoors, and you can go, and it's very much that feel. Or Renaissance Fair, same kind of thing. So, we can enlarge what our perspective of theater is, much more than just sitting static in a chair watching something unfold on stage. So yeah, excellent point. Anybody, anything else on this? If you like, I can pull up the play performance report and we can discuss that briefly. Thumbs up, yes or no? So I'll just bring it up so that you can take a look. Let me go to that portion. Just so that you're clear on it, because it is a 50-point project and pretty much you're working on it by yourself. So it's, I will just look at it right here. And we can just discuss it for a few minutes so that you can see how you'd like to do this. And by the way, I really appreciated those of you who did cite part of the script when you wrote about the trifles. That is very, very insightful, and also that's the thing that trains you in terms of writing for play critique, is it gives you information about how to present your material and then justify it, because it shows that you have understood clearly what's going on. So I'm looking for the play performance report. I guess I have to go to the Canvas site. All right. Let me go there. Here we go. So we'll look at the assignment page. Alrighty. And this is what it looks like. So here's your individual assignment. For week 3, watch a live performance online and write a play performance report. So here's where you can select your options. This is a link to the play performance report I'll open in a moment. So what I'll do is I'll try and find another musical here. This is for people who may have been looking ahead. And you can just actually click on it. I've given you a video link so you can go directly to the play, a synopsis of the play, and then you can look at the play. Again, a synopsis of this play. You only have to pick one. So read the synopsis. If that appeals to you, then you can just click on it. But you do need to look at it. You'll be able to start and stop it because, of course, you'll be on your own computer. And this is how you're going to respond. So this is the play performance report. The first thing you want to do, let me see if I can zoom in. Let's see about this. Here we go. Ugh, sorry, that is definitely not what I wanted to do. Okay. So hopefully you can see this, and it is, you can see in your assignment. There we go. So this is the criteria for the written play performance report. Obviously, you're going to type it because you're going to have to submit it on that little button. Writing about a play should be based on what you see and experience. Now, your experience is going to be in your own location. So try and make that location that you're watching the play in as comfortable as possible so that you are able to focus on what's happening on your screen. Maybe you guys are used to looking at things on your screen. Maybe you're finding things and watching them on your phone. With a play, I think it's important if you can have a little bit larger screen, because to appreciate the full depth of the scenic design, you might want to see a larger picture. So 5 points. Title the page. In the first paragraph, include the type of theater performance space. So are they outdoors? Is it in a thrust scene? Is it in a thrust stage space? Is the audience 3/4 the way around? Is the audience all the way around? Is it in a big arena stage? Is it in a proscenium stage? So if you're looking at a traditional theater piece from the front and it's being filmed from the front and you're seeing one point of view through the picture frame, is it a proscenium? So that's what you're going to do. The name of the play, the date you watched the play. So you're just going to indicate those things so we have a context of where you're going. So please use an essay format. Don't just say number 1, here's the theme, number 2, this. It should be in an essay format, and you should include these observations. What is the overarching theme of the play? So remember we talked about more than one theme, but the action of the play, everything is pointing towards this one universal truth. What is a playwright trying to do? What are they trying to tell the audience? So that is, what is the meaning of the play, the universal truth? So try and spend a little bit of time writing on that. And you might actually be able to give an example from the play. What style did the director choose for this production? Is it realistic? Is it a slice of life? Is it really a fantasy? Is it something like we talked about with Bertolt Brecht? Are they putting you off with it? Are you always supposed to be aware, this is a theater piece, we are not supposed to be engaged with the audience? Was it presentational? They're always telling you exactly what's going to happen. So just, you don't have to have a style vocabulary. You can just tell me what you think you saw. It really was realistic, non-realistic, stilted, and in what style or tempo was the language. So this talks about, was the language formal? Was the language informal? Was it vernacular, slang? How was it? Okay. How did the dialogue unfold? How do people talk to each other? Was it very slow? Did it seem to have a Southern cadence to it? Was it very clipped, very fast. We're people in a hurry. So that's what I mean by the language of the dialogue. How do characters talk to each other? And the speed, what kind of language are they using? Briefly include a comment about the acting style and if one actor fully embodied the character. So there's usually a standout, and often it's the lead. Sometimes it's a minor character that you feel really helped point you to the story. So was there stage business that was specific to this character? And I'll use a very overt example here. For example, when the skull of Hamlet's father is brought in, this is a huge piece of stage business. It's when a character uses a prop to illustrate something about their character. A maid might always have a tray, might have an apron, might have a dusting cloth. The wife might have something that is particular to the play. So just to think about it, was this character that fully embodied, this actor that fully embodied the character, was there something that specifically informed you about his character that they used? Okay, so it's actually usually talking about a physical object. And then discuss the designs for the production. Use specific examples to support your point of view. What is the environment, and how did the set design illustrate the meaning of the play or set the physical context? Was it in a living room? It's an interior environment. The living room is rather faded. The wallpaper's faded. The color is all muted. It seems like it's a very poor location. And the reason why I'm making this point about the meaning of the play is this is a group of people living in poverty is because the colors are all very muted. We can see that the furniture is very shabby. So those are the kinds of examples that support your point of view. Same thing true with costumes. How did the costumes inform the character? Is the character wealthy? Often you tell that with the costume and the jewelry that is worn. Is the character poor but pretending to be wealthy? So there's always a little edge around it. Did the costumes tell you that it's a different time period than what today is? So how does it let you know what the character is about? How did the lighting tell you about the play? It can tell you how you see the play. It can tell you, sometimes there are practical things where they actually turn lights on and off. Sometimes there's a spotlight so that you really see one character more brightly than others. The rest of the characters are sort of muted. Sometimes it's color in lighting. You'll see something that warms, as we say, warms the scene up. Like I said, possibly in trifles for the women, maybe their scenes are warmer than the men, or warmer than when they come in through the door. We see a color temperature change in lighting. Is there sound that goes along with that? As I said before, when the men go up the stairs, do we hear their footsteps? Is there outside ambient sound? Is there music? Is there music before the play starts? Is there music in between, or do you hear a radio? All these kinds of things can influence and support the narrative. And then, so paragraph 5, how did every element work together for the best meaning of the play? And then just give your own opinion. Again, this is about 500 words. It doesn't have to be long, maybe 2 pages, but the 5 paragraph essay format, sort of the introduction of the meaning. And then you end with the director, the acting style and design, and then 1 paragraph to discuss director, 1 to discuss acting, 1 to discuss this plethora of design, and then just conclude whether it was worth seeing. Okay? Is that clear for everybody?
Yeah.
Or at least helpful? Okay, well, that takes us to the end of our time, and I'm just going to sign off for a brief moment and sign back on, and I'm going to pull up the study guide for the midterm, and I'll record that as well. All right, so feel free to take off, and thanks for joining today.